Let's start this video about Spider-Man Far From Home surprises by letting you in on a shocking secret. This video is going to contain some serious spoilers, so either check the movie out first or face the consequences of being spoiled. Today we're going to talk about some of the things from Far From Home that even we didn't see coming. Okay, let's start out by talking about the big giant reveal from Spider-Man Far From Home. No, not that Mysterio was the bad guy all along. Come on, you should have seen that coming a mile away. We're talking about the fact that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. That might not be news to us in the audience, but it certainly is for the people in the MCU. Although it was pretty shocking, maybe it shouldn't have been, considering the amount of time Peter spent with no mask on during the movie. In the lead up to the movie Captain Marvel, we started inspecting everyone from the MCU with even more suspicion than usual. Now that the shape-shifting Skrulls were being introduced into the MCU, anyone could secretly be an alien from another planet. But after we learned the Skrulls are mostly the good guys, that paranoia pretty much went away, but apparently it did so a little bit too soon. It turns out that the Nick Fury and Maria Hill we observed during Far From Home were really secret Skrulls in disguise all along. Not only were these characters Skrulls, but they were the ones we remember from the movie Captain Marvel. Don't worry, even though he's been replaced by a Skrull posing as him, Nick Fury is safe, or at least he certainly seems to be. He looked to be relaxing on a beach, but it only looked to be that way since it was really a hologram. After he's seen exchanging information with Talos, he realized Nick Fury is apparently on board an alien spacecraft filled with even more Skrulls. We didn't catch a glimpse of Captain Marvel anywhere, which of course leaves us wondering where she is. But the even bigger question right now is, what is Nick Fury doing in outer space, and where are his shoes? Seriously, there's just something weird about seeing the ultra-stern Nick Fury wandering around barefoot. As we learned previously in the MCU, BARF stands for Binarily Augmented Retro Framing, and it allows people to re-experience traumatic events for therapeutic purposes. Of course, to the villainous Quentin Beck, this was a waste of perfectly good technology. It was surprising to learn that not only was BARF made relevant again, but it can be used for great evil. To make matters worse, it was undoubtedly created by Quentin using resources and information provided to him by Stark Industries. We have a feeling this wasn't exactly the legacy Tony had hoped to leave behind. In fact, Tony ended up leaving behind quite a mess for his protege Peter Parker to deal with. We know Quentin Beck was a disgruntled former Stark Industries employee, but he wasn't alone. Tony might have been a hero who sacrificed himself to save the day at the end of Avengers Endgame, but he also made tons of mistakes over the course of his career. And some of them ended up costing people dearly. Of course, there was his creation of Ultron, which went over like a homicidal psychopath lead balloon. Then there's the fact that his Battle of New York cleanup ended up creating the Vulture during Spider-Man Homecoming. Come to think of it, Peter Parker ends up dealing with a whole lot of trouble as a direct result of Tony. In the comic books, Quentin Beck was a talented special effects artist who decided his claim to fame was becoming a supervillain. Well, specifically, he wanted to be the guy who took out Spider-Man, but that didn't end up working out too well for him. In Spider-Man Far From Home, it was revealed that Quentin Beck's superhero nemesis was really Iron Man and not Spider-Man, which was a pretty big switcheroo. It was ultimately Tony Stark who sent Quentin down the path of becoming a villain, gathering his fellow disgruntled employees and causing massive amounts of property damage. We mentioned the Skrulls made an appearance in Spider-Man Far From Home, which was pretty surprising, but perhaps even more shocking was that the Kree are apparently still around too. During Captain Marvel, we learned that the Kree aren't the peaceful race they pretend to be, even accounting for outliers like Ronan the Accuser. In fact, they're kind of big jerks, and Carol Danvers vowed to expose their lies and to make them answer for their crimes. While that sounded promising, it was also pretty vague, and we never found out what Carol was up to from the time we saw her in Captain Marvel until Endgame. During Far From Home, we heard Nick Fury, who was actually Talos, talking about Kree sleeper cells. While we were always worrying about secret Skrulls, apparently the real threat was the Kree agents lying in wait. We learned the Kree were bad guys quite some time ago, but Spider-Man being evil, that was pretty big news. Of course, it's definitely not true, but it's definitely surprising. Peter Parker had spent tons of time earning his reputation as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and even ventured into the depths of outer space in order to help save the day. This made it all the more devastating when footage emerged which seemed to show that Peter was behind all of the destruction in Europe, which was actually caused by Quentin Beck and his allies. It turns out that file we saw William downloading was footage of Peter calling off the drones using language which made it seem as though he was activating them. So not only does everyone know Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but they all think Spider-Man is a villain instead of a hero. They say everyone loves a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but we know that's not true. In fact, there's one character in particular who hates our favorite masked web slinger as much as we love him, Jonah Jameson. Seeing that bad boy show up in the MCU was shocking, but even more so was realizing which actor was portraying him. In the Spider-Man films directed by Sam Raimi, the role is played by actor J.K. Simmons. It's well known that the MCU exists as a separate fictional universe, so this cameo was truly surprising. In fact, some fans wonder if it was more than a simple cameo, and perhaps a hint that the Sony universe is one of the alternate timelines in the MCU universe. Tony Stark has always been a generous guy, which isn't that difficult when you're a super bajillionaire. During Far From Home, we discovered that he left Peter Parker one last gift in the form of a pair of sunglasses, which, to be fair, did look much better on Quentin Beck than they did on him. But of course, these are no mere sunglasses, and they contain an AI known as Edith, which stands for Even Dead, I'm the Hero. Hey, at least it's better than Barf. We all know that Tony had faith in Peter, and that he cared for him, but this gift really seemed over the top. In fact, it seems downright irresponsible for Tony to leave something like this in the hands of Peter Parker without even putting some kind of training wheels protocols on it. Pretty much the second Peter popped those bad boys on, he almost destroyed at least one of his classmates. Mysterio is a villain we had been waiting to see on the big screen for what seemed like forever. Not only is he a particularly awesome entry in Spider-Man's rogue gallery, but he's one of those characters who's more than just a mere villain. Mysterio is a downright nemesis of Peter Parker and has a personal vendetta against him. He even started out his career with the intent of taking down Spider-Man. We were under the impression that Far From Home would be the start of a beautiful rivalry between the two characters. But apparently that's not the case, considering Quentin looked quite finished the last time we saw him. Seriously, is that it for this legendary Spider-Man villain? Marvel has fooled us before, but Quentin definitely didn't seem like he was going to be getting up anytime soon. Not only were we hoping Mysterio would be a long-lasting member of the MCU, but we have to admit we were hoping he would herald the arrival of other famous Spider-Man villains. Okay, maybe that's on us for getting our own hopes up, but we still were surprised to see that there were no other big baddies hinted at during Far From Home. In the comic books, Mysterio is one of the original members of the Sinister Six, and so is the Vulture, who we saw in Spider-Man Homecoming. Then there's the void of power left by Tony Stark, which Mysterio even mentioned at one point in the movie. Some fans thought someone like Norman Osborn would move in to fill that void, but that didn't end up happening either. It seems like we'll have to wait and see who the next big villain Spider-Man faces will be. But just because we were hoping for more villains doesn't mean we were dissatisfied with the villain we got. In fact, Mysterio really exceeded our expectations by being an even darker and more twisted villain than we expected in such a generally lighthearted film. Seeing Thor lop off Thanos' head during Endgame should have been a clue that things are getting real in the MCU, but there was still one scene which managed to shock us. Quentin Beck utilizes over-the-top illusions to fight Spider-Man, but one of them went way too far. During one battle, he creates a graveyard featuring a headstone for Tony Stark, and then we see a rotting Iron Man emerging from the ground to lunge at Peter. Not only was it shocking, but it was also pretty traumatizing for us, as well as Peter Parker. When the very first Spider-Man Far From Home trailer came out, we admit to watching it carefully for any hint about what would happen during Avengers Endgame. Mostly we wanted to know the fate of Tony Stark and searched carefully for clues about whether he was alive or not. One interesting aspect of the trailer was that it was Pepper Potts' signature on the giant check, and not Tony's. Of course, we now know that sadly Tony didn't make it, but Pepper is alive and well, as far as we know. We saw her don her rescue suit and help in the fight against Thanos during Endgame. So it was kinda surprising that she didn't make an appearance in Far From Home. Many fans thought she would step in to comfort Peter and provide insight into his relationship with Tony. Instead, Happy Hogan pretty much filled that role, although he may have been primarily motivated by Peter's aunt. In the immediate aftermath of Avengers Infinity War, most people started calling the cataclysmic event involving the Infinity Stones the Snap. Later, it became known as the Decimation, but now it seems like the people of the MCU are downplaying it by calling it the Blip. And really, it's crazy how quickly things pretty much went back to normal. During Endgame, the world was unimaginably bleak and depressing, but now things just seem hunky-dory. Other than having to restart the school year, the kids in Peter's class who got dusted and brought back are just continuing their lives as normal. Only Peter seems to be affected on an emotional level by what happened, which seems pretty unlikely considering all the ramifications of the Blip. While Peter might have been devastated following the events of Endgame, he did manage to show off a skill familiar to us comic book fans. We always knew the MCU version of Peter Parker was intelligent, but we didn't really see the full extent of how smart he is. We knew he invented his web slingers and was an incredible member of his academic decathlon, but fell short of other brilliant minds like Tony Stark and Bruce Banner. In the comic books, Peter Parker is an absolute genius, on par with people even older than himself. We were pleasantly surprised to see this incorporated into Far From Home when Peter was able to effortlessly use Tony's technology to design himself a brandy new suit. Whether he's on par with the MCU's super genius Shuri remains to be seen. In addition to being a genius, Peter Parker has another invisible superpower, which might be his most important one. It's hard to notice his spider sense, but it's a key part of his superhero persona. Peter describes it as a sixth sense, and it allows him to tell when he's in danger. He has super fast reflexes, and this, coupled with his precognitive ability, allows him to avoid most types of injuries. In the comic books, Peter is able to focus or deactivate his spider sense in order to prevent himself from becoming fatigued or distracted. But in Far From Home, this ability just seemingly failed him for no real reason. Even his mortal Aunt May was able to beam him with a banana. After seeing his spider sense in full effect during Avengers Infinity War, we weren't expecting it to disappear. It thankfully came back at the end of the movie, which allowed Spider-Man to defeat Mysterio, but it seemed more like a convenient plot device than a genuine superpower. Sadly, comic book legend Stan Lee perished in November 2018. He was known for creating some of our favorite comic book characters over the years. He also loved making cameos in many beloved superhero movies, some of which were released after he passed away. Apparently, Stan Lee hated to travel, so he would film several cameos in advance at the same time. So we got to see him in movies including Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame. And many wondered if he would show up during Far From Home. But sadly, he never had the opportunity to film one for this movie, and Endgame marked the end of the era of Stan Lee cameos. The movie did pay tribute to both him and Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko, which was a nice touch. At the end of Spider-Man Homecoming, Aunt May got the surprise of her life when she discovered that her nephew Peter is actually Spider-Man. Suddenly, all those late nights and missing backpacks made a whole ton of sense. Now, we know Aunt May is a cool character, and as every male character constantly reminds us, she's very attractive. But still, we were pretty surprised by how casual she was about Peter being Spider-Man during Far From Home. Let's not forget that during Infinity War, he ended up in outer space fighting against aliens, one of whom managed to wipe out half of all life in the universe. You'd think after that, Aunt May would have some second thoughts about Peter's extracurricular activities. But not only is she apparently cool with it, but she even backed his super suit for him when he tried to leave it behind on vacation. Are we sure Aunt May isn't a Skrull who actually wants to destroy Spider-Man? Speaking of people who are secretly Skrulls, let's talk about the whole Nick Fury being secretly Talos thing. What we want to know is just how long Nick Fury has been a secret Skrull. After all, in the movie Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers asked Fury to tell her some things about himself that a Skrull would not know. One of the things he revealed is that he can only eat toast that is not cut diagonally. It's easy to pass this off as a minor personality quirk, but let's look back to a scene from the movie Avengers Age of Ultron. Fury seems to prepare a sandwich by slicing it diagonally. Okay, so it's not quite toast, but it does make us wonder if this was really Fury, or Talos in disguise. Is it a simple continuity error, a misunderstanding regarding Fury's feelings on bread, or something more? And these were just a few of the things that surprised us about Spider-Man Far From Home. Did you see any of these coming? Or was there something else so unexpected it left you shook? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section below, and don't forget to click subscribe for more great videos from us here at CBR. See you next time.